With the beautiful night sky outside, Koyamori sneaks out to wander the glistening streets. There he mentions how he feels free and feels like he belongs, but at a swing, he reveals he's been having trouble sleeping. With a flashback, it turns out that he rejected a girl because he doesn't understand dating, causing him to be sad. As he continues his search for a cure so he can sleep, he runs into a girl at a vending machine. She confronts him about his age, but she identifies his nighttime restlessness as lack of satisfaction with life. She then points out that he'll never be satisfied if he doesn't release his inhibitions, so the two head over to her place. At the elevator, she explains how she gives advice and helps out people who can't sleep. So she instructs him to lay down and insists they share a bed. Nervous, Yamura pretends to be deeply asleep but mentions how he actually feels quite relaxed. Eventually, she reveals herself to be a vampire and draws blood from him, stating how he's unusually tasty. However, he confronts her and she tries to play it off by blaming a mosquito. He then visibly shakes, thinking he's going to turn into a vampire, but she assures him that he won't, as the only way for a human to become a vampire is to fall in love with a vampire and then have that vampire bite them. Yamori is relieved but then disappointed once again. As she reveals her name as Nazuna, he's unable to face returning to normal life, but now believes he has found something to finally excite him, is to be asked to spend more time with her with the goal of falling in love so he can become a vampire as well. While reluctant, Nazuna agrees to spend more nights together in exchange for his blood, and if he happens to fall in love with her, so be it. The next night, Yamori sneaks out once again. This time, he meets Nazuna at a park and explains how turning someone into a vampire is basically how vampires produce offsprings. She then wonders if he remembers why he came, and he tells her that of course he hasn't forgotten as he wants to be a vampire. As they walk back, Yamori starts his quest on falling in love with Nazuna so he can fulfill his wish of becoming a vampire. The next night, he's unable to find her at their usual spot, but she suddenly shows up and explains how she's been looking for a random victim. He becomes jealous, so he offers to exchange contact information. Unfortunately, she has no cell phone. However, she takes him to her apartment where she shows him her vintage brick phone. But it's too heavy, so she doesn't want to carry it around. Nevertheless, she ends up laying on her futon and invites him to sleep with her. Afterwards, she asks if she can finally take his blood, but he refuses, saying he won't become a vampire yet and she should go find someone else. She then explains she was actually looking for him and that it's rare for someone to have blood as tasty as his. Eventually, the two fall asleep together. The next night, he's unable to find her again. As he gets sad, Nazuna descends from the sky and asks where he's been the entire time. Since they keep having trouble with meeting at the right time, he gives her a wrist receiver to communication with him. As they try out their new gadget, he mentions how it's as if they are a brand new couple, which embarrasses Nazuna. Afterwards, she becomes Superman and picks him up as they fly over to his school. At the school's rooftop, she takes his blood, so he asks her if they could be officially friends. Later that night, while asking himself where Nazuna might be, the other transmitter in his wrist receives a signal, just as another girl, who has the other receiver in her wrist, appears beside him. He then recalls being on top of an apartment complex where Nazuna asks if he really has no friends at all. Confused as to what counts as a friend, he says he for sure had friends when he was little. Back in the present, Yamori wonders why Akira has his transceiver, and she explains she never threw it out since he gave it to her. All this time, she waited for him to call, but he never did. But since he's been missing school lately, she called to see how he's been. Yamori then recalls how Akira befriended him. After catching up, Akira asks if they can meet again the next day. He then calls Nazuna to let her know that as it turns out, he actually has one friend. The next day, Nazuna teases him about leaving to see another girl, but his reaction confirms her suspicions. After leaving, Yamori meets with Akira, where he wonders if she likes him, but Nazuna appears. Akira then starts to think that the two are in a relationship, but Nazuna shows her that it's merely physical, as she's a vampire. At a cafe, Yamori tells Akira that he allows Nazuna to drink his blood due to his dissatisfaction with school. She tells him that she feels the same, so she asks him to return to school with her. After Nazuna introduces herself, both her and Yamori leave. After Yamori asks Nazuna if she's angry, she leaves upset. He then trips on some stairs and calls Nazuna, apologizing for seeing Akira in secret. However, Nazuna appears and tells him that she was worried they would see each other less if he returned to school. Yamori tells her that he was unable to tell Akira that he can't return to school due to his dream. But relieved, Nazuna then drinks from the wound in his mouth before jumping away, leaving him speechless. Back at school, one of their classmates is lectured for sleep, depriving himself for playing video games at night. Afterwards, as Yamori sneaks out again, he easily finds Nazuna already waiting for him. However, he avoids her, and he witnesses a couple kissing nearby, causing him to assume that he already loves her as they kissed already. Suddenly, A frustrated Nazuna appears only to be interrupted by Yamori by enticing her to drain his blood. Confused as to why he's behaving this way, she bites him anyways, only for Yamori to realize he hasn't fallen in love yet as he doesn't transform. Meanwhile, Akira has started to have trouble sleeping, so she goes out on a walk during midnight where she runs into Yamori. However, she starts lecturing him to get a healthy sleep cycle, but he brings her along to Nazuna's home. There, they play video games as Nazuna offers kisses to whomever can beat her. A flustered Akira discovers of Nazuna's and Yamori's kiss and tries to dissuade him from falling in love with a vampire. However, Nazuna says to not get the wrong idea as Yamori doesn't like her that way. After playing a dating sim game, they lie down to try and sleep despite Akira feeling weird with all of them being in the same bed. Regardless, she sucks his blood out, so Akira asks what's the whole ordeal with blood sucking. Nazuna explains that it's all about supply and demand, where Yamori chimes in saying he wants to be a vampire too. But he has to fall in love with a vampire for him to transform, embarrassing Nazuna. Eventually, Yamori and Akira have a moment where she says she'll still be her friend even if he becomes a vampire. But she remarks that she will keep trying to get him to go to school no matter what. She then falls asleep and wakes up during the morning, where she realizes she slept for too long. As she leaves, Nazuna asks if she slept well, explaining that people sleep well when they are satisfied with their day. Next, Nazuna ends up in a bathhouse where she instructs the clerk to alert her if her wrist receiver begins beeping. She then bolts out of the bath when it beeps, where she meets Yamori outside wearing a long jacket. After he too has taken a bath himself, Yamori begins experiencing new feelings due to Nazuna's new look, which she teases him about. After she drinks his blood, they decide to rest, but unbeknownst to Yamori, they enter a love hotel. There, Nazuna explains that she can get an idea about what a person is thinking about with the taste of their blood, explaining that she teases his emotions to get a better taste. After leaving, Yamori gets jealous when Nazuna spots a person from which she has drank blood from before, but she says he's the only one she's getting blood from at the moment. Regardless, they head to her apartment, where Nazuna reveals she also runs a home massage parlor. So she massages Yamori free of charge, but focuses in the more relaxing pressure points of his body before trying to drink his blood. However, they are interrupted by the arrival of a client, where Yamori is forced to greet her, and after he finds Nazuna playing in her room, she promises to give him a kiss as a reward if he tends to her client instead. Enter Kiyosumi, who recalls the first night she took Nazuna's massage services. Back in the present, Yamori undertakes her massage, even though he has no experience. After learning his age, Kiyosumi asks him his motivations, and he explains he got fed up with school, so he now just wants to enjoy his nights. Kiyosumi then suddenly realizes how she's genuinely unhappy at her work as well, so she breaks down crying. A worried Yamori then refuses to let her answer a call from her boss to reduce her stress. Afterwards, he tries to get her to experience a new thrill, so he has Nazuna throw her from her window, where she's saved at the last moment. Yamori apologizes for the scare, but he tells Kiyosumi his and Nazuna's secret by saying he wants to become a vampire. He then takes her to walk down the middle of the street, from which she gets a sense of freedom. In the end, she thanks Yamori for alleviating some of her stress, and she encourages him to achieve his goal. However, Yamori tells her he will turn her into a vampire as well, delighting Kiyosumi, while also embarrassing Nazuna. Sometime later, they attend a night pool resort where Yamori angrily pulls Nazuna away from two guys hitting on her. Sensing his jealousy, Nazuna flies him to another pool, where they enjoy themselves and where she drinks his blood.